go ahead and call the Thursday, April 12th, 2018 meeting to order. First item of business is going to be an update on the R9 process, and as I was talking to our colleagues from Russell over here, I want to go ahead and have them introduce themselves. We have actually quite a few elected officials in the room, so first of all, we have some folks from the city of Russell, so if you're an elected official from Russell, go ahead and stand up, introduce yourself so that we know you're here.
I'm Kurt Mayer. I am the mayor of the city of Russell. Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
G. Jason Long, I represent the great citizens of Ward Number 4.
Welcome.
Thank you. Again, thank you for inviting us, and I'm Blaine Stoppel, and I represent Ward 3 of Russell, Kansas.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm Richard Cross, Ward 4.
Good to see you.
I'm Barry Allen Hoffman, and I represent Ward 2 in Russell. So.
I'm Bill Dawson. I represent Ward 2 in Russell, Kansas.
Welcome.
I'm Frank Perano, Ward 1.
Welcome.
I'm Michelle Wagner, Ward 1.
Great. Welcome. And we also invited some elected officials from Ellis County. I'm not seeing anybody in the audience right now. I know that Representative Eber Phelps is here, so thank you very much for being here. You've very much been a part of this process. We also invited elected officials from Ellis and Victoria, and unfortunately I would not recognize you if you're in the audience. So if there are some elected officials from Victoria or Ellis, please feel free to stand up and introduce yourself.
John Schulte, Mayor of Victoria.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you,
We're
Mayor.
so glad that you came, very much.
Welcome.
Okay, not seeing anybody else. What we're going to do is Toby's going to, we have several people who are going to go through several presentations. I know normally our governing body, we like to kind of chime in with questions during the presentation as we think of them. What I would ask is that not only our governing body, but everybody kind of hold questions all the way till the end. If you have something, write it down. Because I feel like this is just as much our meeting as it is Russell and Victoria and all the other electeds that came. So at the end of the presentation, we'll take some questions. All that I ask is that if you're not sitting up here, that you come up to the microphone and state your name for the record. So with that, Mr. Doherty.
Thank you. Toby Doherty, City Manager. The City Commission asked for an R9 update. We have been at this process for quite a while. We're about to reach a pretty major significant milestone in the process. And so I'm here along with Brian Myers, Burns McDonnell with our engineering firm, and Dave Traster, our attorney. And so when you look at the timeline, we filed the change applications way back in June of 2015. And I believe the last time the two governing bodies formally met was the month before that. We met over in Russell, and Dave gave an update on what the change applications that we were about to file were all about. Since then, we've been having meetings back and forth with the Division of Water Resources. We anticipate the master order being issued in May. Being issued for public consumption. There's a procedural process and they have to follow to seek comments from Groundwater Management District Number 5. There'll be a public hearing in the basin where the R9 ranch is located. And then in August, the transfer process would begin. Now, I know the elected officials have all received copies of a worst case scenario, best case scenario schedule on the transfer process. That was prepared by our city attorney here. And he's going to talk a little more about that. So some of the key components of the master order, as you guys are well aware of, we're changing the use from irrigation to municipal. We are changing the points of diversion where the water comes out of the ground, the consumptive use, how much the cities can use of the water on an annual basis, and then the effective date of the actual order itself has been something we've been dealing with DWR on. So I want to hit on two things. One is the points of diversion. And then one is the consumptive use. So the points of diversions are tricky because right now we have several irrigation pivots out there, and in some pivots there are more than one well supplying that pivot. That's a point of diversion where it comes out of the ground. So our engineers have done a good job trying to consolidate based off of water modeling where the best places to put wells would be. But when you put a point on a map, it may not be the exact best spot. You may need to move it a little bit. DWR has regulations involved in how far you can move that well. But when you get into the statutes and the regulations, there's a lot of competing things you have to deal with. There's local source of supply, there's neighboring property boundaries, there's a river that runs through there. And so what we ended up with was these geometric shapes that are actually going to be part of the order So for example, when you look at on the left-hand side, this would be well site A. All of these points of diversions are now combined into a new point of diversion. And then anywhere within that purple area is where we would actually be able to locate the well. So once we move forward, Burns and Mac would go out, and then we would essentially hire somebody to come in and do the drilling. They would then determine the best spot, but they would have to stay within that somewhat rectangular shape. And then off to the right, you have well site K. So these would be attachments. This took a lot to get through. This took engineers and DWR. It takes a lot to get through to come to this. So this is one of the reasons why this has been a pretty slow process. The sustainable yield's another thing. Right now we have almost 8,000 acre feet of water rights at the ranch. Under normal consumptive use calculations, and you change that use from irrigation to something else that's a consumptive use, we would walk away with 6,756 acre feet of water rights. We have been dealing with DWR on agreeing to sustainable use for the property. Burns and Mac has done some modeling and determined that 4,800 acre feet on an average basis, on a 10-year rolling average, is that number to where the ranch is just as sustainable 50 years down the road as it is today. And so we feel like we are making a significant concession in agreeing to utilizing the manner of consumptive use, because that isn't outlined in state law. The farmers in Edwards County don't have to agree to use their water rights sustainably, but this is something we would agree to in order to get through this process. We want this to be sustainable long-term for Hayes, Russell, and the region, and so therefore it's important to us to use it sustainably, and then we would agree to do it. The visual on the right actually shows the benefit to the aquifer by changing the use from irrigation to municipal. So when you look at the long-term effects of that aquifer, that area down there, that aquifer has benefited 225,000 acre feet by switching this to municipal, as opposed to if we just would have left it in irrigation rights and kept using it like we were before. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Meyer. Brian's going to talk a little bit about the reversion activities, and then Dave's going to talk about the transfer process.
Thank you, Toby. I sure appreciate Mayor, Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and really talk about what's been physically going on the ranch over the last few years. So, and we're really talking about the reversion process, and that's converting the ranch into an environment that's going to be sustainable and suitable for a long-term public water supply. What could put us in the best position to ensure that it meets all of those objectives? So there's really a number of components to that. It's the well decommissioning, it's the reestablishment of native grasses, and then continuing to monitor the groundwater quality to understand what this reversion process is doing and how it's improving our situation. So, and as the pre-site said, this started in 2007. Really the first step is retirement of the circles, taking pivots out of operation. And that began really in kind of the south and west portion of the ranch back in 2007 and has progressed to the north and east, ending last year with the last circles coming out of service. For reference, for anybody that was at the meeting on the ranch last year, you see the orange circle there, that was one that was already out of service. And the red circle was still in corn at that time. So to kind of put it in perspective. And so essentially agricultural operations ceased last year. So after a circle's been taken out of service, really one of the first things to look at is taking the well, decommissioning the well. We do this for a variety of reasons. It's predominantly to protect groundwater quality. Take that risk out of it. That really started in 2015 with the first set of wells and circles that have been taken out of service. There was 34 wells decommissioned at that time. It was decided to leave 2 of them in place because they were newer construction and could be strategically used for some other purposes as the ranch is developed. Then just this year, the balance of the wells were decommissioned. 23 wells earlier this year, with 1 being in that same category of potential future use. So, and this really does show the area of activity this year. As I talked about, it's kind of in the north and east, and this shows all of the locations of those wells that were taken out of service this year. in addition to the irrigation wells, there was also some smaller wells, some 6 and 8 inch wells that were found out there. Could have been stock watering at one point in time, but other purposes. If they had a potential for value in the future, they were secured. If they didn't, they were plugged as well. So the first part of the specific well decommissioning is just removal of the equipment. And that includes everything downhole to all the above ground infrastructure, including the engines, the flow meters, the engine covers, and all the associated piping. So that was the first effort, was to get that out of the ground and then to manage it in a way that could be efficiently disposed of or taken off site at the right point. So it was all sorted by category so it could be managed in an efficient way. Then came probably the most important element of it, and as I mentioned, decommissioning the wells, the plugging and abandonment being a specific component, and that's really the water quality protection component. So the plugging was accomplished in accordance with KDHE rules and regulations, which the first step in that process is to basically fill the well with chlorinated sand up to the static water level. Basically, you're maintaining the integrity of that portion of the formation and disinfecting the well in case there is any bacterial contamination at the time. The next step in the process is to cut the well off 3 feet below ground level. And then you essentially fill that balance from the top of the sand to the top of that cut-off casing with cement grout. So that essentially seals the well and protects it. And then that top 3 feet where you cut off will be backfilled with native materials so that any sort of operation in the future is not going to contact that case and disrupt that seal you've created. So this is a nice picture just to kind of give the end results of what's done in each of these cases. That was the before picture with the pump and piping still in place, and then after the site had been restored essentially to pre-conditions, pre-topography conditions. After a circle has been retired, and in some cases this happened even before the wells were decommissioned because of the timing, some of those ones back in 2007, but that's to reestablish the native grasses. So this is really a current status. And as you can see, some of the ones that were taken out of service last year still remain to be seeded. Some of the ones that were in corn, for example, there wasn't enough cover because of the dry periods last year. There wasn't enough cover established. So I believe last fall there was wheat. There will be some additional feed crop planted yet this year and then likely the last ones will be reseeded to native grasses in the 2018-2019 winter time frame, generally the best time to plant native grasses. So at that point, we'll be 100% converted to native grasses. And this is wanted to put this in here because it was really important to us in the beginning to coordinate with NRCS and make sure that we got the best advice in regard to what grass mix and the seeding rate that we were going to use to give ourselves the best chance to establish this in a reasonable time frame and have the best results when it comes to soil erosion stability, and then also creating the best habitat possible and going back to that goal of creating the best conditions for a long-term water supply. So NRCS was consulted and has been consulted along the way. I thought that was an interesting picture on the right in that it doesn't look impressive, but that's the root structure of one of the native grass plants. That was actually probably about 2 years old when that picture was taken. Doesn't look very impressive above ground, but it has a great root structure, and that's what it needs before it actually takes off. So, and just going to talk very briefly. So we've got ongoing water quality monitoring because we want to understand those circles that were taken out of production back in 2007. What are we seeing in the water quality changes? We've been over 10 years. Have we seen the improvement? And then what's going on with the more recently retired circles? So we're going to continue to monitor that and look for those water quality trends and see what that means for treatment, where we want to do our first development. But we have seen significant improvement in regard to nitrate levels in that southern end of the ranch where it's been out of service for some time. So we're optimistic that those trends will continue, but we'll monitor them and respond accordingly. Now this kind of goes to what Toby talked about in regard to the modeling. this is just a picture. We actually use the GMD5 model, which has been used extensively by GMD5. The thought process was that you use a tool that they'd already accepted and that was generally already in use in the area. The square actually represents the modeled area for the project, and of course then the ranch in the center. And this is how we did those calculations on sustainable yield that Toby talked about earlier. And the results, as mentioned, really this kind of summarizes it and really hones in on that 4,800 acre feet. You see as you move, and those are actually 2 monitoring points within the ranch, and you start to look at what level do we start to see a very small change in the saturated thickness. And these model runs were done over a couple of different times, a 17-year run and then a 51-year run. And when you hit that sweet spot in the middle, which is the 4,800 acre feet, you really have less than a 1% change in the saturated thickness over that 51-year period. High level of confidence that that's our sustainable amount. So that's really important. And as Toby said, that's kind of a leadership thing that the city of Hayes is doing, showing that this is a long-term water supply. So. And I'll turn it over to Dave at this point.
I too appreciate the opportunity to come visit with you all about this process. It's been a long road to get here, and we've got a long road to go to get to the end point. We actually filed the transfer application in this process. Yeah, okay, you told me how to run it.
Big button.
Operator error. So we filed those applications, the change applications that we're working on now in June of 2015, and we filed the transfer application itself in January, knowing that it wasn't complete. Again, I need to do this. Okay, so as Toby said, we anticipate by the end of this month having this master order and the change orders to get finalized as between KD or DWR and Russell and Hayes, after which there will be a public meeting. We want to hear comments from the public and from the GMD. I mean, we've spent a lot of time and a lot of thought, but that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody can't bring up an issue that we need to adjust. It's sometimes seeing the forest for the trees and all, or trees for the forest can be a problem. So we're gonna, while this is out for public comment, we'll be revising the transfer order. We filed it. We knew there were gonna be some changes. We've learned some things since we filed it. So we're gonna make some amendments to the transfer application while we're waiting for the comments on the master order. We anticipate, and I wanted to mention this, we anticipate asking Hayes and Russell to sign off on this master order so that it's clear that we're all in, that this is something that we agree with, that the DWR agrees with. Obviously, I don't have authority to say, yes, we'll sign it. That's something that the Hayes and Commission and the Russell Council have to decide along with the managers. But I wanted to give you a heads up that that's coming after the comment period and it's final. When we get to a final agreement, assuming we do, and we have some tricky issues that we still are working on, but assuming we get to a final agreement that's acceptable, and I think we will be coming back and asking you for your approval on the terms and conditions of that master order. So that's what we're doing. I keep punching the button. So we've got to get, under the regulations, we have to have a quote complete unquote transfer application. And to get that, we've got to have these change applications in place. So when the chief engineer signs that master order and the attachment, which will be an individual order for each one of the water rights, making the changes, which are conditional on at that project actually going forward. That is going to be the trigger to make the transfer application complete. Then we have the hearing panel is KDHE's, probably be the director of the Division of Environment, the director of the Kansas Water Office, and the chief engineer. They will ask for the appointment of a hearing officer. The hearing officer needs to be someone who understands water law and understands administrative procedures. And we will go through this process of having a hearing on the question of whether or not the water should be transferred from Edwards County to Shinchin, basically, and then on to Hayes and Russell as the cities decide. So I think most of this, this is the big question that's presented, and it is that the transfer panel has to decide. Now, the chief engineer will have already said it's a reasonable quantity. Yes, it's okay to take it from this source, and it's okay to use it for this purpose. But the question here is, what are the benefits to the state of granting the transfer versus the benefits to the state of denying the transfer? Now, if you know anything about understanding some of the history of the Transfer Act is helpful. It was really enacted when Wichita, Hutchinson, McPherson wanted to go to Milford. And people onto the east of there, hey, wait a minute, we might need that water. And so that was the purpose for it. It really never was contemplated for something like this, where we already own a water right that can be converted. It was more for, hey, we've got this big reservoir of water that's unallocated, and we should make a policy decision at the state level about what's the best use of that water on into the future. Nevertheless, it's broadly worded. We fall under it. We have to go through this process. So that's the question. And I think you have this schedule that I put together. Now, I caution you not to pay very close attention to the specific dates, because I said, okay, well, these are the dates I think. Then Toby said, well, what about this? And then some documents were prepared. And then he sent it to DWR, and David Barfield said, well, wait a minute, what about? And so at this point, the specific dates that on documents that were prepared 2 weeks ago might not be quite accurate. But what I think where we are now is that we should have this master order agreed to and prepared for public comment by the end of this month. Toby said May. Okay, so it goes to the GMD in May. We've already sent them the model that Brian talked about. So they've already got the model report and the model documents, so they may be already reviewing some of that in anticipation of the transfer proceeding. And what I did in this document is to say, okay, if I'm the very most aggressive and everything works perfectly and there are no delays and there's no opposition and everybody gets in line and says, yeah, let's go, that's the column that the minimum date. And then I said, well, what are the dates? I mean, what's likely and then add a factor to say what's a little, not necessarily realistic, but a little more than, what's the worst case? Now, I don't know that that's absolutely the worst case, but it's the bad case, I guess, if you say it. So we're looking at 600 days from the date that the chief engineer signs off on the transfer application itself being complete. Is it good? Can we do it in less than that? Absolutely. Will we try? Absolutely. I mean, we are focused very much on getting this done quickly. This has taken a long time. I will tell you that your city manager has been very difficult to work with at times. And I say that tongue in cheek. I hope that's clear, but he's pushed and pushed and pushed, and not wanting to get on his bad side, I've pushed and pushed and pushed. And DWR, we have got their attention. I'm confident that we've got their attention. What they've got, they have issues. I mean, they've got 5 lawyer slots with 3 of them unfilled. And they've got a lot of other issues they're dealing with, but the lawyer who I'm working with almost on a daily basis is working hard. And we've got their attention, and I think it's going to result in a master order. If we can get these last few issues ironed out, I think we're going to get there. So, Toby, that's kind of where I am. Is there anything else that I missed that you want me to cover?
No, I think we just stand for questions if any of the elected officials have any questions.
So if there's anybody, and not just elected officials, but anybody in the audience, first I would ask if there's elected officials
If you
who
wanna
want to
sit
ask
here,
any
I'll go.
questions, or anybody of our body who has anything to ask, go ahead. Come on up, Kurt.
Kurt Mader, Mayor, City of Russell. I guess my main question would be, after having these discussions with DWR, what's your read on their feeling on this project? Do they feel pretty confident about it, or do you feel confident about how they are viewing it, or?
Okay, I understand. That's a little bit tricky because I just got off the phone with them and they're pushing back on some issues, so I got to step away from that for a minute here. I actually think that they are very supportive. They want this project to go forward for a number of reasons. One is, if they were to deny this, if this doesn't go away, what are the cities going to do with this ranch? You're not in the farming business. You're not farmers. You're not, and if there was some absolute obstacle to the transfer, it's going to go back to irrigation, and that's not it could go back to irrigation, and that's not something they want. They're getting a lot of acre feet back, basically. So I think that's a factor. I think that the governor's vision that you've all heard about, that was developed by Governor Brownback, has a number of key factors and goals and objectives, from water quality to reservoirs and all kinds of things. But one of the things I think recognize in that vision is that the water isn't always right where you need it. And Hayes and Russell are in this spot that, my dad used to say, I grew up at Ulysses. I've probably said this to some of you before. Ulysses is in the heart of fishing country. 500 miles any direction you want to go is pretty good fishing. All right, well, Russell and Hayes are in the heart of water country. It's about 70 miles to good water every direction. We don't have surface water, we don't have groundwater, and so I think they want to solve that problem. And so there are the vision talks about transfers and the need to get water to the right place. And as populations grow in areas where there is water but not enough, these transfers are likely to come along. So this is sort of their experiment in a way. So yes, I think they are supportive, they are favorable, except they're pushing back on some things, and we're pushing back too. So
I guess my other question would be, do we have any indication how the good people of Edwards County feel about this project?
Well, I have there's a lawyer I work with who grew up in Edwards County, and her father was Terry Fuller. And Terry was the lawyer who filed the mandamus action in the Supreme Court when Hayes and Russell bought this ranch. And Terry was a hell of a lawyer. But I know his daughter. He's now deceased. And she tells me that there are people in Kinsley who still don't like it. But the reality is that I'm not hearing a lot of opposition. And there are issues in that basin that I think are bigger than this. The Rattlesnake Creek and Quivira is a major issue. And that's going to draw attention away from this process. And so, but we're going to have a public meeting down there.
So we'll have
And
a
we'll
better
need,
feel.
yeah, we'll have a better feel. We'll need somebody from Russell to be there, to,
Give me a time and a place.
And if I could add, I know groundwater management district number 5 doesn't represent Kinsley or Edwards County or the mindset there. But they do represent the basin that we're in. And so the official word we've received from GMD5 is, as long as Hayes and Russell are following the statutes and regulations, we don't see why it would be an issue. And Commissioner Jacobs and I met with Farm Bureau, and they said the same thing. They wanted to know about the project, and they said the same thing. As long as Hayes and Russell are following the regulations, which we're actually going above and beyond the regulations and statutes.
And that was the point I was going to make, is that it appears from what I've seen that the numbers are actually going to be better after we complete this process than they have been while it was in production. So,
Sure.
From that standpoint, I would think they would look at it and say, well, they're actually leaving a little water in the ground. So, I would think that would be a good thing for the people of Edwards County, so.
right.
Okay. Thank
Any
you.
other
That's all I
questions?
have.
I have two quick questions, which they're not. One for Mr. Tracer, one for Mr. Bryan. Mr. Tracer, if they were to reject this, what kind of precedent would it set for any future water transfer in the state of Kansas? If the panel were to say, nope, we just don't see enough here, not working. That would make the
Well,
water transfer.
if they denied it, and that stuck, I mean, I've had a conversation with the city manager, and he told me that if, we're gonna have a scorched earth policy. And, I mean, but, okay, to answer your question, yeah, that'd be a problem. I mean, that's really a problem.
For the rest of the state.
Right, and
Well,
there are issues here and in other cases where DWR is trying to put toothpaste back in the tube or the horse back in the barn, whatever metaphor you want to use, and there are some issues, but I don't see that happening, frankly. But your question's a good one, and I think there'd be a lot of concern. I think
Commissioner-
there'd be a legislative fix.
Let me jump in just for a second. We've been told from the start to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Right.
And so I've worked on this project for 30 years, and I know that what we've been doing is dotting our i's and crossing our t's. What Mr. Traster's politely saying is that if they don't approve this, we think that would not stand legally.
Right.
Okay?
That's right. Mr. Meyer, once this is cleared, what are the next steps and how would we proceed to getting the water from there to us?
Yeah, the next steps would be to go ahead and initiate the preliminary design of the ranch, starting most likely with, as Toby mentioned, locating the exact well locations, doing a test drilling program, finding where the most productive locations within the parameters are set, finishing the work on the hydraulics and how we would convey the water to the city of Hayes and Russell. The pipeline hydraulics, some of the preliminary work has already been done. So look at finalizing alignments. The booster pump station, in this case, in the preliminary design, there's only one booster pump station, and that's on the ranch, which is a very positive thing. And as full development would take place, that would potentially expand. But yeah, moving through the design process and moving and looking at the connection points and how it would be conveyed once it actually reached Shinshin.
So, very good.
Any other questions?
I just have one comment, being relatively new to the process. I did keep up with it as a resident of the community, but not as intently as I am now. And it has been very clear to me that we've really gone above and beyond. It's almost like we want to say, that's not all necessary. But as Toby alluded to, when we visited with the Farm Bureau, they said the same thing. And that feels really good in this process, that I can't imagine we haven't done everything we need to do to make it happen. And we appreciate that.
One, for me, if I could, one thing I think is important this getting passed is, the relationships we have with Russell, Ellis, Victoria, and Hayes. I mean, if we don't get this to me is going to be huge on how we develop in the next 20, 30, 40 years. And I think we got a great relationship with all these communities. They're all part of what we do. And, and the residents of this town is why we're where we're at, I think. All the actions have been in place since Representative Phelps has been on here when they bought the ranch. And the residents haven't really balked at it. They just do it. It's a way of life here, and I think that's why we're where we're at. And I think we're going to get it. It's just going to take time.
Any other questions from anybody in the audience who wants to ask a question, elected official or not? Okay. I'm going to be seeing none. I'm just concur with Commissioner Bussel. I really appreciate both of you coming and presenting and putting your time and effort into this. I don't think that it can be said enough that all the compromises that we've already made, not just to get this project going, but we do care about sustainability. We do want this to be a long-term 75-plus year water source. I don't think that can be said too many times during this process. Appreciate all of your hard work with DWR, and I hope that we'll be seeing you again soon, hopefully in less than a month when the draft order is issued.
Well, there's one comment I would like to add, and I hate to add this at the end, but we've had significant concessions from DWR. I mean, this order is not the standard order. And when you saw those purple areas, we said, look, we want to be able to drill within 1,000 feet of the location when the standard is 300. And they said yes to the extent they could, as long as it complied. And the reason those purple shapes are oddly shaped is because other rules encroached. But they've given us flexibility on the well locations. They normally say, okay, well, here's a fixed quantity. This is all you get for the next 20 or 40 years, but we've got a system that allows us to, as populations increase in Hayes and populations increase in Russell, those quantities can ratchet up. They're already quite a bit more water, and those provisions have been difficult to work through, but they've been very flexible. And so back to the question of, are they on board? Yes, I think they are. I mean, they've given us a lot of flexibility. I should have said that earlier rather than after you made your closing comments, but I just wanted to point that out.
No, I really appreciate that. I am glad that they have been flexible in working with us, just as we've been flexible in working with them.
And it is an honor to be able to represent the city of Hayes. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Glad to have both of you here. We're going to pause because I think their representative. Go ahead.
Someone else going to speak?
Did we have any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move we recess for 5 minutes.
Yes. Go ahead and have a second. Call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye.
This is the wizard.
Next item is approval of the minutes from the March 22nd meeting. Any changes? Seeing none, we'll have some citizen comments. This would be for non-agenda items, so if you're here to comment on the audit, you can wait until the audit item. Okay. Looks like we don't think that there was anything actually on the consent agenda, so next is the 2017 audit.
We have with us tonight Melissa Romy and Sophia Sanders from Adams Brown Baron Ball to give you some highlights on the 2017 audit. We're very happy. Once again, we have a clean audit. I'm a little upset I didn't get the memo on the red and the black, but
Well,
Yeah.
what can we say?
Unplanned. I want to indulge just a minute and give kudos to staff, city clerk staff, city finance staff, because without them dotting i's, crossing t's, making sure every penny counts, this can't be possible. So we appreciate those staff and making that happen every day, actually. So I'll let them give you a little review.
Well, good evening. You have a loose leaf letter in your packet. Sophie's going to go over that at the end of the presentation. We're just going to hit the highlights tonight. Again, nothing substantial has changed that's significantly different. On pages 1 through 5 is what we call the independent auditor's report. And so it goes through, it tells you about the basis of accounting that you're using, your opinion units, and those types of items that your bond company or somebody else may be interested in. And the one thing it does say is that it doesn't include all component units, and it does not include the City of Hayes Housing Authority. But again, you do not have direct control over that entity. If we go back to page 5, this is what we call management's discussion and analysis. And this right here is actually written by your city staff and included within the report. And so if you look at pages 5 through 10, this is what the city has presented. I'm going to actually start my presentation on page 11. And this right here is what we call the statement of net assets. And this would be like if you would be for a commercial business. And so when you look at it, it includes all your infrastructure, it includes depreciation, and that's on everything, not just your utility funds, but on your city government, on all your general governmental funds. And so we're going to look at the third column from the right-hand side of the page, and I'm just going to go over your total assets for the year. Went up by about $6.4 million from a year ago. And the reason for that is right now you've got some capital projects that are what we call construction and process. It means they're not quite finalized yet, but in the governmental world underneath generally accepted accounting principles, we pick them up as a fixed asset, and then later on when they're completed, they're moved over into the depreciation process. And so those are the projects you have going on. Part of it would be the wastewater treatment plant. You have that in construction, and so obviously it's not completed yet. Plus you had some street projects that were ongoing towards the end of the year. If we go over to page 12, this is all the liabilities that the City of Hayes has at the very end of the year. And again, if you look at the third column from the right-hand side of the page, it is $33.9 million. That went up by about went down by $611,000 from the previous year. And again, the city was able to start the infrastructure and those capital projects, and by putting the money away in reserve funds, then you have not had to go out and obtain debt in order to do that. And so you are seeing that reflected here. And again, it includes all your debt, whether you would have capital leases, your general obligation bonds. It also includes things such as CAPERS, the Kansas Public Employers Retirement System. There's a component that they, at CAPERS, calculates that you would have due, so your obligation, those are all included in here, but yet they are staying consistent from year to year. Going to the next page, page 13, this would be the retained earnings for the City of Hayes when you take a look at it. And the first line item is net investment in assets. The city has invested $105 million in net assets, which is up about $3 million over the previous year. If you take a look at the restriction, you have budget capitalization of $3 $3,197,000. And again, those monies have been set aside for specific projects from future commissions for you to use here in later years. The total net position is $157,164,000. So again, that number increased because of the capital assets we talked about a little bit earlier. I'm going to take you over to page 11, and I'm going to change it just a little bit. I'm going to have you look at the right hand or the left hand side of the page. I'm going to have you look up one line. I'm sorry, page 14. And so I'm going to have you look at the very left-hand column, and it's expenses. Instead of looking at it as total governmental, total business, I want to look at it the total primary government. Your total expenditures for the year were $26,813,689. And that includes depreciation on your assets, on every asset that the city owns on their depreciation schedule. So it's a comprehensive of everything that you would have, whether it's actual cash outflow that you had or other things. Depreciation doesn't generate cash outflow. If you go over one column to the right-hand side, the charges for services, so you're charging for utility fees and some other items that come in from the airport, that type of thing. So you've collected $9,867,689 of services. There was some small operating grants that you had for $6,813. We have some capital and reimbursements or contributions for $677,547. If you go over two more rows over underneath the 2017 totals, you'll see, so you've collected revenue, so the other $16,261,660 of expenditures that you need to offset with revenue. And then if you slide down that column, you have property taxes that the city receives of $6 million. You have sales tax of $12 million. You had motor vehicle and franchise fees of $1.4 and $600,000. And if you continue down, you have transient guest tax, special assessments, unrestricted interest income. And so you collected other revenue to offset those expenses that the city has of $23,009,644, which then left you with a positive net position of $6,747,984, and that's to fund for your future as you go forward. Okay, I'm going to have you flip over to page 15. Now this right here breaks down your governmental funds, and so if we take a look at them, your major funds are your general fund, your employee benefit fund, your bond and interest fund, your airport fund, and all the other funds that make that up, whether it's commission reserve fund, your capital projects, capital improvements, those funds come underneath here. If you look between the on the right-hand column, second one in, you'll notice that over the past year, you went down by $5 million in total assets to $20,040,000. And again, you have some capital projects that are going on. You expended that cash in order to make those construction improvements. And if you look down underneath total liabilities and deferred inflow and outflows, you'll notice that that stayed fairly consistent. So you didn't take debt out to match that at this point. If there's no questions on that page, I'm going to take you back 2 more pages to page 17. This right here, when you take a look at the total revenues, a year ago you had about $3.1 million of reimbursements that came in through airport grants, those types of projects that you had ongoing. This year you did not, so your total revenues are down to $21 million. If you take a look then at your total expenditures for the past year, it stayed within you decreased it by $600,000. And again, you had some things that you had not anticipated on respending, some transfers in that. So if you go down and you take a look at your other financing sources, you'll notice that a year ago you had some bond proceeds of 5.8 million, whereas this year you only had 1.5 million of a bond. You also had some transfers in and some transfers out, and those are between the utility funds and the general government fund. If there's no questions on that page, I'm actually going to take you back to page 22. The first 3 pages that we skipped over are your utility funds. And again, we can look at the assets. Yes, they went up and that. But let's take a look at how your statement of cash flows this year, what it's looking like. And so if you look at the second column from the right-hand side of the page, you were actually able to, you have cash provided by operations. That means that your operations exceeded your expenditures, and so you were able to, last year it was 3.3 million, this year it went up to 4.3 million. If we take a look at net cash by investing activities, last year it was 76,000, this year it's 256,000. If we look at transfers, they went down by 500,000 from a year ago, from 2.9 million to 2.4 million. And then if we take a look at your capital and related financing activities, you'll see that a year ago you had purchases and some construction, and that was the start of the KDHE wastewater plant of 2.5 million. This year it's at 772,000. And then we had some water exploration costs. Last year was 192,000. This year it was 257,000. This year we had some GO bond refunding. So you actually paid off the bonds in the utility funds for 703,000. And then if you look at the very last item is the local sales tax. A year ago it was 2,934,000, and this year it did decrease a little bit down to 2,911,000. And again, I know that's no surprise because you have reported on it in previous commission meetings. So when you take a look at those net increases on your cash, you were actually able to put back into your overall cash in the utility funds 3.1 million. If there's no questions, I'm actually going to flip you clear back to page 92. As you had last year, you have what we call single audit, or they've also upgraded the name to uniform guidance. And so the single audit means that you've expended federal funds in excess of $750,000 for the year 2017. The major program that you do have is your wastewater treatment plant. The revolving loan that you're getting in, those are actually titled as federal funds, and so you have to be able, you're documenting those, you're also recording those, and then there's certain expenditure requirements that you have to meet. On this right here, this is what the federal government, we file your report with the federal government, Federal Clearinghouse, and we also file it with the state of Kansas. They're going to look at this summary of auditors' results, and what they're looking for is a couple things. They're looking to see if underneath the financial statements, did you have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, or did you have any material non-compliance items noted? And no, you did not. Then we take a look, and your major program was the capitalization grants for clean water state revolving funds that I just discussed. They're looking again to see, did you meet all the criteria that you needed to within that federal fund? Was there any material weaknesses that we had to cite? Was there any significant deficiencies we had to cite? Or was there any non-compliance within that grant? And no, there was not. So you do get a clean audit report from here. Just so that, I'm going to have you flip back to page 95, just so that you can see how much your federal expenditures were this past year. On the wastewater treatment, you spent $6,079,223. Your total federal expenditures at the City of Hayes was $6,713,199. Are there any questions on the audit report?
Thank you very much for your hard work. It's very nice to come in and hear this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sophie's going to go over the governance letter.
And that's the loose leaf letter that's at the front of the audit report. And this is a governance letter that you guys get each year, and this just states that we encountered no difficulties during the audit. We got all of the information in a timely manner. And then this letter also discusses any audit findings that we have, and like Kim said, there were none this year, but I will have you flip back to the last page. We just have an informational note on here. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board is making a change that will go into effect beginning after December 15th of 2019. And this change is in regards to how leases are reported on the financials. Currently, only capital leases need to be on the financials, but going forward, it will be capital and operating leases. And this is just to make the financial statements more transparent and more beneficial for the readers. Any questions on that? And currently, the city does not have any leases, so.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Thank you for your work as always, very professional. Thank you to staff for your excellent work.
Yes, thank
And
you,
we
staff.
do want to thank everybody for their help. We do have a lot of questions. Everybody has been very courteous. They took prompt attention to our questions so that we were able to get our report completed and to you tonight, so thank you. We would ask at some point that the audit report would be approved so that we know we can send it in.
We're going to do it right now. I move we accept the 2017 City of Hayes audit presented by Adams, Brown, Baird, and Ball.
I have a motion by Commissioner Swaller and seconded by Commissioner Dingle. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
For
Thank
coming
you.
and for your work. Thank you, Kim, for all your hard work and staff.
Kim, Toby,
Bravo.
staff, thank you guys.
Kim does the heavy lifting on this. Kim and Lori Hurdle.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you guys. That's
The
great.
smile on his face just comes right off to our faces as well. Great job.
That's awesome.
Next item is an option to purchase property near 27th and Commerce Parkway.
The City Commission is being presented with an 18-month option to purchase a 91-acre tract of property located at the southeast corner of 27th Street. I'm sorry. Southeast of 27th and Commerce Parkway.
Oh, sorry. I heard I-70.
The option is structured as an 18-month option, $50,000. And I have put down $15,000 to secure the option to present it to you. City Commission is being asked to authorize the additional $35,000 to formally secure it for 18 months. The option is prorated, so if the commission decides to purchase the property at the front end of the option, then we get a significant amount of credit for the $50,000. That would then expire as it gets closer to the end of the option period.
I think we might have some members of the audience who want to speak on this issue, so if it's okay with my fellow commissioners, I think that if there's anybody in the audience who would like to come forward and speak on this issue, we'd be more than happy to hear what you have to say. All I would ask is that you limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes and state your name for the record.
I'm Doug Williams, local real estate broker.
Welcome, Doug.
Thank you for listening. I have to admit, when I heard this concept, somebody told me about it, I didn't read about it. I told them they were crazy, that the city would never get into the real estate speculation business. Turns out I was wrong. With over 100 to 150,000 square feet of retail space empty in Hayes, ample land for development, why the city would consider something like this still baffles me. I'm telling you the truth. I just don't understand it. And I think that, and we can argue all day about the spot, although it's interesting to me that we have heard a lot of preaching over the last few years about infill, and then we immediately go out 2 miles outside of town with a commercial development that's anything but infill. But I'm really struggling to understand the logic. I get the whole retail sales tax issue. I understand the dilemma, but I don't think this is the role that city government should be playing. I understand, I fully agree with the CIDs and the TIFs that are being done for the convention center. That makes sense. That seems to me to be a role for this body to do. It's a specific project. They need some help to make it work, and you do that. But to speculate on a location that may or may not pan out and only give yourself 18 months really boxes in a corner, I think. And I guess I just don't understand. I'm trying to give it the benefit of the doubt, but when I look at it, I only see two scenarios on this. One is you've squandered $50,000, and the other is you've squandered $50,000 and made everybody mad, including local real estate developers, potential real estate developers who might look at the community and come in and say, do I really want to compete with the city of Hayes? So I'll just pass, I'll go on to someplace else. So I'm confused. And I voiced that to a couple of you. I don't think I changed anybody's mind because you seem hell-bent on moving forward with this, but I can't see it as a positive move for the retail development in Hayes. I really don't.
So Doug, I've known you, well, my entire life, and before I was born, for some reason the city bought some land and developed a plant that it then leased back, or was leased to Travenol. And then when they bugged out to go to Puerto Rico, we then energized again to get a battery manufacturer. And if that wasn't enough, we built a street, we created an industrial park, we created a nonprofit entity that developed land for a scaffolding company, a call center, which we've bought and sold several times, Glassman Corporation, a reserve center. We've been in the real estate business for 50-some years. So this isn't new. And what came to our attention was that we were working with the prior mayor. We contacted a company called the Colette Group, and they're based out of South Carolina, I believe, and are very big in developing retail mixed development spaces. Most recently in a place called Garden City, and they are now in a lawsuit with the city of Lawrence because they actually own some land, and Lawrence doesn't think it's the right place for a shopping. It's just like this piece of land. So they are so anxious to develop. But when they came to Hayes, they said that our land prices were 40% higher than anywhere they've ever done business. And there was $1 million difference in the price that they were willing to pay, $1 million difference. So this and some other activities have led us to say, what can we do to smooth this process? We think it's a matter of supply and demand. We know that Hayes is going to grow primarily to the north and to the east. Is this a wise decision? I don't know that it is or isn't. Is it going to make people unhappy? Unfortunately, it will. We don't really want to be in this business. As a person in this business, I don't want the city in this business. But there's something that has to happen to break this logjam. And whether or not we exercise this option, we want to see action. And our hiring of Retail Strategies Incorporated to help us map out where we think we may be going. Those two things are hinged. And in order for it to happen, we have to have land, we have to have some leads. And so that's why the matter is structured the way it is. So I don't think I've answered your question, but the short answer is we've already been doing this for 55 years. And second, we think there's an opportunity to do it right now. There's more to come because we know that there needs to be housing and jobs and all that. But this is one leg of a three-legged stool that has to happen if this community is going to survive in the 21st century, because right now we're merely treading water. And it's not about sales tax. Again, it's about affordable housing and jobs, and this all fits together.
So I would argue that this is different than some of the projects that they've been in. This is purely speculative. The other, when you get Travenol back or what have you, that's a little bit different story.
I wasn't here when Commerce Parkway happened, and you're right, I was at college. But the mere speculative nature was enough to irritate a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And recruiting the battery plant was enough to get a long-standing city commissioner not reelected to his top spot. So the city has been in the speculative business before, much to the ire of its residents. And particularly when we went south to get a well field along the Smoky, very controversial. So the city has had to go beyond what is considered traditional in order to grow this tiny little frontier town. And that's what we're trying to do.
How this ground's for sale for anybody to buy and do anything with.
Correct.
Why would the city have to do something with it? What changes?
We asked that question as well. And I'm going to let the others answer it because they have the answers too.
For me, the reason I was excited about this to begin with is we've heard over and over and over from Colette Group, from other groups, that land prices are high. And as soon as anybody's interested, look at the Ambassador Hotel, as soon as somebody's interested in it, the price of the land triples. These have been consistently quoted to us as the things that are stopping development. Sure, we would like somebody to be interested in this corner and just go buy it from the current property owner. But as soon as there's a rumor in town that anybody's interested in developing this exit on I-70, which I still am surprised has not happened, either the landowner jumps it or somebody else buys it and the price is back up in the rafters. For me, the $50,000 is a potential to develop this, for one, but it's also an opportunity to test the theory that the reason we're not developing is because land prices are too high. We can get this land, we can have it developable for a minor fraction of what everyone else is asking for land. If land prices are truly the issue that are keeping us from developing, then this will develop. If this does not develop in 18 months, or there's nobody on the line for this in 18 months, then land prices aren't the issue, and we need to start looking at another direction and another way to stimulate development. But if land prices actually are the issue, this is an excellent and affordable experiment in testing that logic for why we're not growing.
Well, I think you'll find, my opinion, that land prices are not the problem. It's easy to say, well, they didn't come here because our land's too expensive. These retailers are smart, and they're not afraid to come ask you people for whatever they want to come in here. And I don't know that you've turned anybody down that has been, well, with the exception of possibly Woofter, but that's a whole different story. Have you researched land prices in Garden City, Salina, and those kind of places? Because I've talked to people there, and I don't think we're that far out of line. 40% would, and then higher than anywhere. That's a pretty broad statement as well.
I don't know about 40%, but yes, we have, and I don't know that I would agree with 40%, but the information that I've been presented is that yes, we are significantly higher than those other communities.
Well, and Doug, I somewhat agree with you. You know, I've talked to some of the main developers here in Hayes, and they say, you know, people are just using that, saying, you know, land's too high. And, you know, like he was saying, you know, if we do this and nothing happens, then you know what? I think what they've been saying since I've been on the commission isn't correct. But right now, that's what we get thrown in our face every single time. And I told the city manager, I think we need to quit talking about the land's too high, because I think people are using that against us. You know, we say we have an affordable housing problem, which I think we do, but we've done the studies and people
Define
say,
affordable, that's the problem.
well, exactly.
Right.
And I agree with you.
I agree with you.
So,
yeah.
and I think this is, I mean, the $50,000 is a small amount to see if that's correct. And I hope that we're right. There's a great chance that we'll be wrong on this.
Well, I hope you're right, too. I hope these people come in and do some good, but I think there's a lot better chance they're going to fill the 150,000 square feet that's empty and some North Vine property than this.
Yeah.
Who loses?
Right, and
Why don't we let them try that first?
But how long do we wait?
Right, I think that's the
Doug,
question.
I want to tell you, and like I said, I'm talking the circle, it could be 10, 30 people that I talk with every day. And they're like, why is Hayes not trying to grow? And I know some people are like, well, Hayes is just fine where it's at. But I want to see Hayes grow. Does it need to be Salina or Garden City? You know, but everybody compares this to Kearney. Look at Kearney. You go up there and that town is just blowing up, which is completely different circumstance. But, I mean, I've been here since 95, and we haven't done anything. I mean, we've grown north of the interstate, but it's just baby steps. I mean, why not try and grow?
I'm all for growth.
I agree with everything you just said, Doug. I mean, you know, fill the existing space, fill North Vine.
Absolutely.
If that happened, awesome. I am so happy. I don't care where this takes place. I just want it to happen. And if it's here, or if it's on the south side, or if it's Vine, or if it's A Street, I don't care where it happens. I just want it to happen. You know, I think going back to the CID and the TIF, this is we've already had a long conversation on this. But you know, one of the things that we really didn't talk about is, I think sometimes what we see with CIDs and TIFs is that can actually inflate the price of the land, because just as the people who own land are very aware of them and what they can be used for, and that they can be used to offset the price of land, retailers are very aware of that. And so in a way, by us offering those incentives, there may be a part of that that's kind of biting us when it comes to land prices. Again, I have no evidence to show for that. It's just, I'm just using simple logic. If I was a landowner and I knew that there was a mechanism out there for somebody to close the gap, why not? You know, why not ask for a higher price? And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying that that would be my logic. So, go ahead, Sandy.
I'm sorry. My comments were very short because my look at it is much more simplistic. I appreciate everything the other commissioners said and agree with most of what has been said. It became very simple for me. When I ran for office as City Commission, one thing that I had in the platform was sustainable economic growth. That's one thing that I've been very focused on. There's a key word there, and that's sustainable. To find sustainable growth, you have to look far into the future, I believe. This is a matter of things falling in place at a certain time. I've been involved in retail all my career and understand development. This piece of property, and I'm not even going to get into price of other land. This is a well-priced piece of property, I believe. I think it can be purchased, as we see, for a good price. We've invested in retail strategies to the tune of $50,000 so far. So we're going to put another $50,000 out there to give them the opportunity to succeed. That truly is where I'm coming from. I firmly believe, and you and I have had this conversation, I think if we are fortunate enough, I want 3 exits for Hayes. I don't want just one on Vine Street. I would like it to be like Salina on 135 where you have 4 exits, and once they get off, they're in the community. It's all very simple, but I see the growth going north from there if we're fortunate enough to get that development. There's some housing area out there that could be developed. It's another back door into the North Vine. I don't want the city to get involved in this kind of thing any more than anybody else does. But I think this is an opportunity from not a political standpoint, but from doing what's right for the community of Hayes, that we take this chance. And there is risk, and we admit that. But it's a small risk in terms of what the reward could be.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Doug. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And to everybody who showed up, and if there's anybody else, it looks like there is.
My name's Tammy Norris, and I'm with Advanced Real Estate here in Hayes.
Welcome.
I currently, and for the past 3 years, have represented Bill Lusk in the land that he has here in town. We have had land on the market that is sitting on 22nd and Commerce Parkway. The price on that land varies anywhere from $1.50 to $3.50 a square foot. And I would welcome Colette to approach us and see. There is a fixed price that is out there as a list price. Mr. Lusk is a professional land developer, so it's not something to where he has someone interested and he will raise prices just due to interest. So infrastructure is in place for most of the land. It has been out there, it's been publicly advertised. So, you know, I do disagree with some of the statements that have been made as far as what's available, price fluctuations and things like that.
Tammy, I will tell you, I talked to Colette myself a year ago, and they said, whether this is true or not, I have no proof, but their exact words to me, they want nothing to do with anything off of Vine Street.
And that could be, but then that challenges the land that you guys are looking at for something.
It challenges
that they
retail
would
strategies.
develop.
Yeah, very much so. I agree.
And I think some of that is also a mentality, and that's where people have
Yeah.
to look past just that one exit, you know, that's on Vine. And I think there's challenges on Vine Street that they don't necessarily also take into consideration.
And that's part of the goal of this as well, is if the city does this and develops this, we don't need to make any money off of it when we're developing
But I
it
think-
either. And so if we can get it started on this corner, then we can develop Commerce Parkway
I
throughout.
think you also have to look, though, Mr. Luss did just buy additional land this last year in town. And I'm speaking for him without necessarily having that direct conversation, but I would question whether he would have bought additional land in Hayes if he would have known that this would have been a plan in the future, because it is running direct competition with the land that he already has.
Okay. Any other? Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Is there anybody else that is in the audience that would like to make any comments? No?
I'll move that we approve the 18-month option to purchase the land for the sum of $35,000 to be funded out of the Commission Capital Reserve.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Jacobs and seconded by Commissioner Dinkle. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Commissioner Dinkle, did you have any additional comments to add?
other than I'm excited that we just did that.
Okay, Commissioner Jacobs?
I'm glad the realtors that are represented are still here because I want to really express my appreciation for you getting involved in this process, for the conversations we've had. I've had more conversations with realtors and developers in this community in the last 2 weeks than I've had for a long time. I think we've made some great inroads with some developers. We have some new understandings in some area. We have an area we agree to disagree, and that's going to happen. But I think the future of this community looks pretty good right now.
I would agree, and I had the opportunity by, I guess, luck last week, Mr. Otley contacted me after the meeting, and it was really good info. And honestly, for me, going forward is something that will always be in the back of my mind on, working with the developers that we have in Hayes, if it's possible. And he made some remarks that I questioned, but I feel like I learned from it, and it's something that I will, going forward, will definitely take into account on our future development.
Toby, I want to thank you and staff and also our attorney and the engineers for the presentation on the R9 Ranch. This has been, as Mr. Bird said, a 300-year journey. It's been a very long journey, not only from the purchase of the ranch, but then our application now coming on 3 years ago. And the fact that you have stood for this and keep fighting for it and keep pushing shows that we're going to get this done, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I agree.
I too, I'm glad that y'all are still here. I don't know how you felt, but I walked away from our meeting that we had the other day. I feel like I understand you better. There was really some great questions that were asked, and I'm glad that the conversation moved off of just one piece of property and more to our general global problems. Because I think that we're not going to see eye to eye on this one, but I think that there's a lot of things that we do agree on. And I also think that we should look back to the retail strategies portion of this, because they're going to need folks just like you to work with. What I'm hoping is that they're going to come back with a lot of leads and a lot of potential. And while this may be an option for them, they need to be looking at everything, and they need to have all the options on the table in order to get a full press court on anybody that they might want to bring into this community. You guys need to be a part of that. My hope and my plea to you would be to not let this one disagreement on one piece of ground sour the waters, and that you reach out to retail strategies. I'm sure that the city manager is going to request them to reach out to all of you, so that we can get everything on the table and really have a good conversation. I agree with Commissioner Jacobs. I've had some really good conversations, not only with you guys, but with developers. I've learned a lot. You guys asked some great questions. I appreciate all of you showing up here tonight. As far as R9, I do appreciate what city staff has done, all the work that you guys have put into it, and it was a great presentation tonight. In a way, it was really exciting, but in another way, knowing that we've gone through this process for 3 years and we have years more in the process, but it is worth it, because if we can solve our water problems, I think that it's going to be a benefit to this community for decades to come. With that, we are adjourned. May God bless the city of Hayes.
Toby,